Catherine is a weird game. Not the weirdest in the world, but a weird one nevertheless. The strangest games I've played that springs to my mind would be the Ribbon, the WarioWare series, and anything by Suda51, before his creative control slowly became smothered by the increasing grips of big publishers thinking they know better than him to cater for his audience. Thanks, EA! I've always been aware of Catherine as being that weird game on the last gen consoles, but I never got around to playing it for myself. But after finding it on sale for going around about £2.50, I thought why not, and give you my thoughts on it. I've never played any of the Persona series, which are games that the developer Atlas are most notable for, but to me I know them as the guys at the Trauma Center, an operating game series that doesn't get as much coverage as it deserves. It's like Surgeon Simulator only with responsive controls and endless dialogue spouted out by manga looking characters. Anyway, Catherine is a game of two halves, one half being narrative focused with NPC interactivity, whilst the other half is a puzzler where you need to climb up a tower of blocks by shifting them and creating the world's most elaborate staircase. Kinda like a vertical version of Karushi to the 6 people that know the game. The whole game is actually played through the lens of a soap opera under the name Golden Playhouse that's introduced by this lady who you don't get to see until the very end. And as a way of making it authentic, every cutscene has this watermark on the top left, which kind of bugged me a little bit. I think they should have made it a little bit smaller, but after a while you do forget that it's there. Almost. You play as 32-year-old Vincent Brooks, a system engineer who you never see him at his workplace, who's been going out with Catherine for 5 years. Slowly but surely she's been prodding him into marrying her and to start a family. But Vincent is hesitant in doing so through fear of big changes in his life and giving up being a bachelor. During a night of drinking at a stray sheep bar alone, he comes across a girl called Catherine, who is perhaps almost too good to be true. However, come the morning after and oh dear, he just slept with her and has no memory of what happened the night before. Not only is he having to deal with his love triangle, he happens to have these strange nightmares that he can't remember whenever he wakes up. On the news, other men have been found dead in their bedrooms under mysterious circumstances, perhaps in connection with what he's been suffering with. And so begins a week-long descent into madness as he attempts to make things right in his love life, whilst at the same time trying to save his own life from potentially being killed in his sleep. All of this is presented to you in lengthy cutscenes that switches between traditional anime segments to in-game graphic cutscenes that hold up in its own right. The cel-shaded models never look too jarring between the transition of dimensions, and the dialogue overall is pretty solid. One thing noted is that despite it being a very Japanese game, there's no option to swap the English dub with Japanese voice acting. Personally, this didn't bother me since I often switch the subtitles off during these anime sections to focus what's going on screen, but does this game really need to announce that I switch the subtitles on and off all the time?
Subtitle off.
Anyhow, I enjoyed the performances apart from one or two which got a little bit annoying after a while, but nothing too rage-inducing. As mentioned earlier, the game is split into 2 sections or 3 if you want to include the cutscenes as they take up a considerable amount of your playtime. During the day and evenings, you hang out at the stray sheep bar with Vincent's 3 friends. His best friend Orlando, who wears a hat, Toby, a 23-year-old who wears a hat, and Johnny, who doesn't wear a hat. They have their individual traits by being a source for advice, the baby of the group, and the cool mysterious one who is always ambiguous with his own motives. There's also the bar waitress Erica, who feels in conversations and often scorns Vincent whenever he feels sorry for himself despite cheating on his potential wife-to-be. You could talk to any of these characters to give the plot some more weight, revealing some history between the 4 and eventually fleshing out the characters even if it's only minor. You can walk about in this weird pose and talk to other patrons of the bar where they tell you a little bit about themselves, but also their woes and worries. There's no time restraint in how long you can be there for. Time only progresses when you talk to someone or have a few drinks. The patrons act like a side quest of sorts, making sure you talk to them and answer it appropriately and hope to see them in the following night. You won't be able to save them all in your first playthrough, so if you are inclined enough to do so, I would recommend retrying. You receive text messages from both Catherines throughout the game, and it gives you options on how to respond. Depending on your response, a scale is shown pointing to which way the answer leans towards. At first it might look like a standard moral-based system that we've seen in other games, but let's just say that it isn't as straightforward as it seems. This partially determines the outcome of the game between one of 8 possible endings, so replayability on multiple playthroughs is always encouraged. However, it came to a point where I was really suspicious of Catherine, and I was desperate for Vincent to dump her to prevent things from getting worse, and even though I replied with blunt answers and sometimes lies, it had no effect on the continuing storyline. But what it did do by coincidence was, despite me trying my best to shake her off, in the ongoing cutscenes after these segments, Vincent becomes more nervous around her. He's increasingly apprehensive with what she's saying and realising that he's further digging himself into a hole that he can't get out of. The strange thing is looking back at the footage of the start of the game, it didn't feel like there was much bond between Vincent and McBride, probably because they have been dating 5 years prior to the game's events, but there wasn't a moment where I felt like they were a genuine couple. And once the other Catherine is introduced, I think the developers were trying to tempt us to stick with this new girl and ditch McBride, only to then change our minds once the stakes are raised. For a game that's trying to be as open-ended to its ability, I couldn't help but feel that there is a linearity to the game's plot right up until the end. Although the contrast in the design between both Catherines is something I appreciate. McBride with her long grey hair, glasses and a black jumper represents a worn down relationship that feels like it's gone old for Vincent. The glasses and long sleeve jumper symbolises a conservative lifestyle of rules and tradition. I mean, her surname is McBride for God's sake, it can't get any more obvious. And on the other side of the spectrum we see Catherine's short blonde hair with odd pigtails, big blue eyes, and white attire that could be mistaken for lingerie, all points to her being an attempted representation of temptation itself. That's a very hard sentence I just read. Even though she's meant to be this dream girl of Vincent's, I don't think I ever saw him look comfortable with her. It's always like, oh shit, she's in my bed, how did this happen? You know, that kind of thing. She does offer her own insight into what marriage is for her at the start of the game, but nothing ever felt like there was a connection between these two either. And yes, I feel like the game is always hinting to go for Catherine. I mean, her name is on the cover after all. Even when you open up a message from her, you hear a suggestive giggle. Whereas with McBride, you receive a lowly sigh. I ended up going for McBride since I was suspicious of Catherine from the very start, and I called out the plot point which turned out to be true. Yay for me, I guess. Yeah. Besides, leaving somebody you've known for years with someone that you had a one-night stand with doesn't exactly compute with me. Call me crazy, but I think cheating is wrong. And I'd rather have Vincent risk losing both Catherines rather than McBride finding out that he cheated on her, leaving him to be with Catherine, and live on in pure ignorance with no regard for other people's feelings except for his own. Okay, so I may have developed a soft spot for McBride, but that's partly due to defying with what the game wants me to do, but also on the whole, she isn't really a bad person. She just wants what's best for her and Vincent in the long run, and being in their early 30s, it's a time for most people to determine how they want to live for the rest of their lives, and obviously McBride wants to have her family and a loving husband. Not saying marriage is the answer to all. In fact, early on in the game I was asked if marriage is where life ends and where life begins, and I chose to form my answer. But I can certainly respect one's decision and understand that matrimony can work for some. Okay, maybe I'm getting a little bit off topic here. Bottom line is, I think Vincent is an indecisive tool that has no backbone and is always falling back on himself. And did I ever feel sorry for him? God no! For the majority of the game I couldn't stand him being so unsure of himself, never doing the right thing when the solution is blatantly within touching distance. And I never felt like I saw a true character arc from him until the very end of the game. It's like he just floats between waking up, seeing either Catherine's, going to the bar, moan for a bit and go to sleep. But perhaps this formulaic lifestyle of Vincent's is intentional. After all, the game revolves around having nightmares that he can't remember much from, and he does begin to lose his grip on reality at times. The monotony of adult life is exhibited throughout the game, and the shift between dialogue-heavy moments and block-focused puzzles and gameplay can be very dissonant to some. But coming back to your immediate actions having an effect on the general plot, is non-existent. They could have replaced bits of dialogue with other parts to subtly take note of what decisions the player has made so far, making the final act feel less immediate in the changed motives of Vincent. Despite this, overall I feel the story with its twists and turns, including some funny moments when Vincent is about to get caught by Catherine seeing his actual girlfriend, is a competently written romantic tale. Another thing I liked about the Stray Sheep Bar is when you take 3 sips of your drink, a prompt shows up and the game tells you various trivia about beer, cocktails, sake and whiskey. They're limited to 1 per drink in each night, and listening to them is a really nice touch that got me making Vincent drunk every night. However, you can't stay in the bar all night long drinking away your troubles. Sooner or later, you'll have to go to sleep and enter the realm of nightmares. The majority of the game is set in Vincent's nightmares and revolves around rearranging blocks to ascend towers. As a form of humility and some comic relief, Vincent dons nothing but his polka dot underwear, growing some ram horns on his head and clutching onto a pillow. The levels offer an array of obstacles that will require strategy, quick thinking and good old trial and error. And be warned, because these levels can get deviously hard very quickly. The difficulty spikes forces you to alter your strategies for ascending these stages. On top of that, rows of blocks deplete over time, raising the stakes even higher to make quick-fire decisions to guarantee your success. But don't fret, you can undo your moves to make deaths less of a recurring issue. This still didn't stop me from dying many times however, so much so that certain levels I referred to a guide just to get out of a rut. Thankfully there wasn't a point where all the levels afterward became too hard for me, it was only about 3 of them that I had some difficulty with. Once you beat a level, you arrive on a big platform that roughly resembles the inside of a church, populated by talking sheep. These turn out to be other men having the same nightmare as you are, and they see Vincent as a bipedal sheep in their own perspective. Much like in the daytime segments, you can talk to these NPCs, with some offering insight into their descent into madness and panic. Sometimes it gets really dark, becoming nihilistic with some of the sheep you talk to. There's a sense of every man for himself as they talk about how some had to kick somebody down to save their own skin, or how they were helping others, but through betrayal they're now looking out for themselves. Yet there is a small group that will tell you a multitude of techniques you can use in future levels. Even Vincent helps expand on existing techniques in exchange. There's an expansive amount of techniques, and it really feels nothing has been left out for a potential sequel. In fact, due to the self-contained story and how small the scale of events are that take place, I hope that this is the only time we'll see these characters and mechanics. There's, something special about seeing a standalone game with its own identity every now and then. You can also purchase items to help you on your way, as creating an extra block, removing enemies, or enable you to climb 2 blocks high. But it's possible to overcome every level in the game without having to use a single power-up, so if you're looking for an extra challenge, all power to you. On a side note, whilst you're in these mini hub areas, the audio does feel a little bit unbalanced. The dialogue and the music in the background is dominated by the ringing tolls of a bell. This became a major gripe for me as I couldn't hear what they were saying. I still talked to everyone just to make the most out of it, but the bells were intolerable. I mean, yeah, it is meant to be a nightmare, but not for my ears. Anyway, you progress by going into a confessional booth and answer a question by this mysterious voice. These questions mainly revolve around relationships, but sometimes they can be very odd, like which sport do you prefer? And how is golf bad? I mean, for God's sake, come on. These help determine what ending you're going to have, and these are mandatory, whereas the text messages are optional. Movement is recommended to be performed by using the D-pad of the controller, in contrast to the contemporary use of the analog stick. You can still use the analog stick to move around, but the design of these levels make the D-pad a more comfortable option. Although it sometimes felt like there was a slight delay when changing direction, and sometimes when I think I'm about to move a block, Vincent climbs on top of it. In later levels where speed is the utmost importance, I always felt like I wasn't going as fast as I could. Also, when you hang and scale across the blocks and go behind the levels, the controls are reversed once you let go, which makes for some very awkward attempts along the way back. Also, you can't move the camera behind the stage, so you try and take a peek on the side and hope for the best. As you progress, you're introduced to more variations of blocks, such as spike traps, ice blocks, dark blocks that can be a struggle to move, and many more later on. Also, other sheep are attempting to scale alongside you that can get in the way, but you can kick them down a level or hit them with your pillow. This mixes up the level design and encourages experimentation with the techniques that you've learnt along the way. The music, much like the gameplay, is split between 2 styles, the daytime segments having mainly a laid-back piano-based soundtrack to accompany the momentum of where the plot is going. Certain tracks have a jazz influence, but it's mostly downplayed, nothing too dramatic except for certain scenes where the tension does build up. You can unlock more tracks for the jukebox as you beat more nightmare stages, some being tracks from previous Persona titles, and certain tracks do remind me of Trauma Center, having a laid-back bass line and smooth electric piano, reminiscent of underground bars or high-class places that you'd see in the film noir. It plays to the game's themes of relationships, commitment, infidelity, love, and maturity. There's some elements of modern electronic music in its instrumentation, but it obscures whilst at the same time complementing its older counterparts. During cutscenes, string sections are often played along with some piano to keep in the theme with the daytime segments, but sometimes it can surprise you with some out-of-nowhere tracks. This of course leads to the Nightmare Stages music, which are reworked versions of classical pieces. While I'm not keen on the idea of remixing classical pieces, as I've heard some truly terrible ones in the past, Catherine sort of works. What's good is that apart from 1 or 2, none of them were instantly recognisable tracks that most people would know. They felt like they were intentionally chosen to suit each stage. Using selected works by Beethoven, Bach, Chopin and other composers whose names I can't pronounce have been altered slightly by adding guitars, electronic elements and a conventional drum kit. Thankfully I enjoyed each of the tracks in their respective levels as they create a huge amount of tension and drama. One of my favourite but also most hated things in Catherine were the bosses, big and grotesque monstrosities conjured up by Vincent's insecurities and fears. They all have their own particular look and present a set of attacks for you to avoid. This creates even more pressure, but at times when the boss is building up an attack, the camera can zoom out to focus on the boss, making it harder to keep track and getting away from the thing. Also, upon failing numerous times, certain bosses' outbursts can become very repetitive and a tad annoying, and that's not including the bell tolls that occur near the end of the level.
I got it.
Reaching the goal is always gratifying as you get a sense of scale when you see how far you've progressed by the map before each stage. If you want some practice with your techniques, in the bar you can play on the arcade game Rapunzel, which shares the same mechanics as the Nightmare stages, only instead of focusing on speed and dexterity, it has a limited amount of moves that you can use to move blocks around with. It creates a more strategic approach to solving these puzzles with 64 levels in total. It's surprisingly deep for an in-universe minigame. After you beat the game, you unlock a couple of extra modes. Colosseum is a 2-player versus mode where you climb selected levels from the main game and can even knock your opponent off, but I have no one to play with, so here's me pausing and quitting the game. What I did play, however, was the other mode, Babel. It acts as an arcade mode with 4 extremely difficult stages where it randomly generates blocks for you to overcome. One drawback is, however, in order to unlock all of these stages, you first have to receive a gold award on stages in the main game. Another problem with that, however, is that there isn't a new game plus kind of mode, which enables you to select which level you need to get a gold award from. So you'll have to skip through every cutscene, breeze through the daytime sections, skip some more, and then get to the nightmare stages. But on the plus side, if you select the same difficulty and you got a gold award from your previous playthrough, you can skip the stage to make things less arduous. Even though it is a very plot heavy game, filled with many themes and sometimes very dark undertones, I don't want to spoil any major plot points, and even though it did come out in 2011, I'd highly recommend you give this a unique game a go, even if you're unsure about its style. I'm pleasantly surprised how much I enjoy Catherine. Granted, it isn't the best game in the world, and I feel that it didn't go deep enough into the many themes it touches upon, some of which can be deemed as controversial, which I'd rather let you find out for yourself. And the isolated bond between its narrative and gameplay can put off lots of people. But that's what I like about both segments in Catherine. A romantic comedy with supernatural elements jammed into a block-based puzzler shouldn't work, but somehow it does for me. I think through its consistent presentation, the brilliant soundtrack, and devilishly difficult levels, Catherine has an irresistible charm that will make it a very memorable title for years to come. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.